Kazuna was a virgin loser who simps after a baddie who doesn't know he exists. However, this changes when he moves into the same dorm with her and tries to rizz her up, but her crazy roommates all want him instead. Everything starts at school as Kazuna sees a hot girl named Ritsu at the library and starts staring mindlessly at her. However, he gets interrupted when his classmate, Tagamai, shows up and asks if he's really moving out of his parents' house. Kazuna confirms this, but before he knows it, Ritsu has left the library, and it pains him because he wanted to talk to her. After class, Kazuna leaves home to check out his new dorm, but on the way, he finds a creep named Shirosaki staring at the females of an academy, and decides to dial the cops on him. Shirosaki then calls him by name, and it shocks Kazuna because he hasn't met the guy before. Just then, a policeman arrives to arrest the dude, so Kazuna uses the opportunity to take off. Shortly after, arrives at his new dorm, where he meets the manager named Sumiko. The old lady welcomes him and shows him to his room, but Kazuna is displeased when she tells him that he'll be sharing the place with someone. Coincidentally, Shirosaki arrives and reveals that he's the roommate, and he knows Kazuna because Sumiko has shown him his picture before. Hearing this terrifies Kazuna, and he begins shaking when he sees that only a small curtain separates his side of the room from Shirosaki's, because the dude's last name is Diddy. Feeling uncomfortable, Kazuna decides to leave the dormitory and never return. But at the door, he bumps into Ritsu, which causes his heart to race. As he realizes that Ritsu lives in this dorm, he gets too excited and tries to start a conversation with her, but she leaves him on read and threatens to smack him for crossing into the ladies' side of the dorm. Later on, Kazuna gets the crazy idea to peek at Ritsu's room, only to get caught red-handed when Sumiko arrives to call him for tea. While Kazuna joins Sumiko for tea, Sumiko realizes he's thinking about Ritsu and says, Later, Kazuna sees Ritsu leaving her room, so he hides by a corner and starts drooling over how cute she is. Midway through, Shirosaki appears and reminds Kazuna he didn't bring a futon, so they'll have to share his bed and cuddle at night. Kazuna refuses and insists he prefers 69 position, which leaves Ritsu disgusted. Seeing her reaction, Kazuna tries to explain himself, but he mistakenly crosses the ladies section and gets whopped for it. The following day, Kazuna complains about Ritsu because she's been cold to him, to the extent of ignoring him at school. Hearing this, Shirosaki pulls up a picture of another dormant named Mayume, so Kazuna checks it out and develops red cheeks because her body is tea. After this, Kazuna heads out on a stroll to clear his head. On the way, Kazuna notices a fat-chested chick at a beach.
Nice.
Cussing her ex-boyfriend for two-timing her with a supermodel. He listens to what she says and starts feeling sorry for her ex, but when he notices she's drunk, he tries to talk her out of standing close to the river. At first, she thinks he's trying to hit on her, but when Kazuna says he isn't, she assumes she isn't cute enough to be his type and decides to jump into the river. Kazuna arrives just in time to stop her, but this little act makes her fall for him and try to steal a kiss. Before that can happen, Ritsu shows up from nowhere and smacks the chick, leaving Kazuna completely shocked. Turns out, Ritsu knows the girl, and it then clicks in Kazuna's head that she's Mayume. Just then, Mayume climbs up the stairs to slide all the way down, so Ritsu drops the blunt act and rushes up the stairs to talk some sense into Mayume. In doing this, she mistakenly slips with Mayume, and they both fall on Kazuna's face. Later on, over dinner, everyone enjoys their meal, except Kazuna, who is struggling with pain in his mouth. When Ritsu notices, she apologizes for hurting him, and it makes him realize that she isn't always the blunt type. However, Mayume interrupts the moment and promises to let Kazuna massage her plots to make up for crashing into his face.
It should have been me, not him!
The next morning at the manor, as the residents have their breakfast, Sumiko informs them that she'll spend the upcoming holidays traveling with a friend. Curious, she asks them for their plans, and Kazuna says he'll laze around all day, while Ritsu talks about going to bury her head in books at the library. Shiro and Mayume list their degenerate plans, and it makes Kazuna realize he's the only one who doesn't have anything productive to do. Before taking her leave, Sumiko warns them not to act too crazy, and if Ritsu snitches on them, she'll raise their house rent. Kazuna quickly asks to confirm he won't be held accountable for Shiro's misconduct. At the start of the summer break, Kazuna lazes around all day and complains about being too broke to afford a car or touch grass, unlike Ritsu, who keeps going to the library. While he wishes to hang out with her more often, Kazuna curses his luck as he sees Shiro fastening a rope, so he concludes that the weirdo wants to use it for roleplay. He immediately turns down Shiro's offer to get glycerin, but when he hears that Mayumi loves to watch what Shiro's up to, Kazuna gets curious. A few moments later, he goes to the common room only for Mayumi to crawl out of her room like a creepy spider and spook Kazuna like he has seen a ghost. Mayumi then questions him for not rushing to her aid, and she gets mad at him for being so afraid of her taser. In response, he asks her why she's depressed. But then she tells him the break is the period where couples all over Japan get lovey-dovey. She starts ranting and filling the screen with words that it has Kazuna wonder if she's drunk. She gets pissed at him and lashes out at the world for her poor taste in men. To cheer her up, he informs her about how Shiro had said she'd love what he's up to, but then she sulks, thinking Shiro also wants to take advantage of her. As she continues degrading herself, Shiro calls out to them and shows them the bubbles he's made with glycerin. Interested, they join him and blow large bubbles, and this lifts Mayume's spirit. During that time, Ritsu gets back from the library, and she gets captivated by the giant bubble used to cover Mayumi. Kazuna sees her, so he asks if she'd like to join, but Ritsu declines and walks off, only to show up later to watch them. Upon realizing that she isn't honest with her feelings, they convince her to try it out, and she joins them. Unfortunately for her, the precious moment doesn't last long, as the bubble explodes in her mouth. She shyly asks to try it again, but saying so sends fire into Kazuna's nether regions. The grown-ups understand the boy's plight, and as they make fun of him, Ritsu realizes her slip-up, so she smacks Kazuna on the cheek. Later that night, during dinner, Sumeko learns of what happened, and Shiro asks her if he won't get dragged along into Kazuna's mess. Days later, Kazuna daydreams while watching Mayume do her laundry, so she teases him about wanting to see her plot armor. But then he tells her it's none of his concern. She gets frightened and throws a tantrum, while wondering if he was brought up properly, but Kazuna leaves to get his laundry. On the way, he spots a piece of clothing, and he sweats buckets as he wonders if it's Mayume's bikini piece. Shiro sees him and casually picks it up, noting it's a scrunchie, so he shows up later in a hilarious outfit made from face towels to hand it to Mayume. There, the flatmates do their laundry, and Kazuna blends in with them. Ritsu shows up shortly afterwards with curtains, and Sumiko asks her and Kazuna to get some more in a different room. As they get to it, Kazuna silently complains about how hard it is to get close to Ritsu. He tries conversing with her, but struggles to get a good response. When they head back, they witness Shiro's funny pose in the wind, and Kazuna says something funny. As a result, Ritsu bursts out laughing, and Kazuna joins her in it. Some minutes later, the others ask them what's funny, but Ritsu tells Kazuna to keep it a secret. Sumeko then reveals how long it has been since she heard Ritsu laugh, and this causes Kazuna to feel he has accomplished a great feat. On the way later that day, he sees a piece of clothing on the ground and casually picks it up, believing it's a scrunchie, but to his horror, it's Sumeko's plot armor. His careless behavior takes him 10 steps back from getting close to Ritsu. A couple of days later, Mayumi tries to shove Shiro's face into Kazuna's, but Kazuna screams for help. Luckily, Sumeko shows up, so they break free from their games. Shiro asks Mayumi why she's in a bad mood, and Mayumi reveals that during her office party, everything went well until one of her junior colleagues announced she was getting married. Brimming with hatred and jealousy, Mayumi demands that they all watch a horror movie. So during the late hours, they not only set the place up like a ritual site, but they also invite everyone. Ritsu at first tries to bail, but after Mayumi informs her that the first person to run off is most times the first person to croak, Ritsu tries to summon her courage. Worst of all, Shiro decorates the entire hallway with candles, and it frightens Ritsu, so she stays behind to watch with them. A few minutes into the movie, Mayume happily gleams as some couples in the show are unalived. Kazuna, on the other hand, spots Ritsu shivering, so he scoots her way and finds her cute for trying to hide her fear. He then looks at the others who are jewels deep into the movie and watches them compare a character to Sayaka, another resident, so he realizes he hasn't met her yet. To get the best reaction out of Ritsu, Kazuna tells her to check the screen, but moments later, they nearly give up the ghost after getting spooked. The movie ends, and as Mayumi asks them to watch another, Ritsu tells her to accompany her to the bathroom. Just then, they run into Sayaka, who immediately latches onto Mayume to cop a feel out of her bazingas. Once Sayaka sees Kazuna, she introduces herself to him, and he falls for her while wondering if she's also weird like the rest of the housemates. Mayume gets pissed at Sayaka's acting, and she takes out her frustration on Kazuna for being so gullible. She latches onto him and warns him not to get ensnared by Sayaka, and Sayaka sees how close they are, so she gets jealous. After watching her reaction, Kazuna wonders if it's normal. One time after school, Kazuna tries to talk Ritsu into going home with him, but she ignores him like he's a bore. His friend finds him losing aura points, so he tries to educate him on Riz 101, but Kazuna is far too gone to learn how to aura farm. When Kazuna gets home, Sumeko informs him that his long-awaited order has arrived, so he rushes to the balcony, and as soon as he spots his mountain bike, he nearly goons to it. While he rants on the specifications and how it lines up with his fantasy, Mayume snatches it and rides along with Shiro, so Kazuna quickly snatches it from her and scolds her for beating him to ride it. She retorts by blaming his lack of experience, so she tries to compare it with her school days, but she ends up sulking after remembering how it was the peak of her romance years. Meanwhile, Shiro gets hold of his bike's rope, and he fiddles with it till he binds it on the second seat. Kazuona tries to get it off, and as he struggles with it, Sumiko reveals Shiro is very good at tying things up. Just then, Ritsu returns from school, and Kazuna is glad when Ritsu greets him like a housewife. Sayaka then passes the ball to Kazuna by asking Ritsu if she'd like to ride with Kazuna to school, but then Kazuna fumbles his chance by showing her the seat bound with ropes. They get creeped out and leave to prepare dinner, but shortly afterwards, Sayaka asks Kazuna if he likes Ritsu, and he stutters like crazy while trying to deny before running off. Right after he leaves, Shiro realizes that Kazuna's chances are so slim. The next day, Kazume tries to ask Ritsu to ride with him, but she rejects him, so he darts out and bolts to school, thinking she has a problem with him. The others watching them make fun of Ritsu by saying what they wished had happened when Kazuna asked her to join him. There, Sumiko reveals that Ritsu's grandfather was the original owner of the manor, and Ritsu can enact her right as the current owner to change the rent. Immediately, Ritsu warns them that she can increase their rent by 50%, and they act accordingly by apologizing to her. During the school period, Kazuna notes he has a library duty, and he feels awkward not knowing how to face Ritsu, who had blatantly rejected him earlier that morning, but he summons his courage and enters nevertheless. To his surprise, she apologizes for cruelly rejecting him earlier and then explains how she'd prefer to walk and read. As she tries putting it into words about how he isn't the problem but the housemates who would make fun of them, Kazuna calms her down, and she goes her separate way. He silently watches her read and wonders if he got closer to her or not. Later that day, after school, he returns to the manor only to find the housemates paired up and wrestling each other. Naturally, he feasts his eyes on Mayume's bouncing milkers, but then he spots Ritsu hugging her knees all alone, and Mayume immediately bonks him. Not knowing what had happened, Kazuna asks Ritsu what's wrong, but she walks off with tears in her eyes. Just then, Mayumi receives a text from her ex, and her mood instantly flips. The others look at her with judgmental eyes, but she brims with happiness as she wonders if he wants to get back with her. The ex calls her, so she leaves happily to answer it, and they are all concerned for her. The next day, Mayume puts on her makeup and acts jovial like a maiden in love, and the others find it unbearable to watch, since they believe her ex has her on a leash. During that period, Kazuna watches Ritsu and notices she's acting weird, so he wonders if she's fallen for someone, but then he brushes it off. One time, Shiro makes a Glock that shoots out rubber pellets, so he tells Kazuna that Mayumi would like it. Moments later, Kazuna sees Mayumi heading out for her date with her ex, and she tells him to inform Sumiko not to make her food. Kazuna feels kinda bad, so he tells her about the gun Shiro had made and how they'll make her favorite dish that night. Still, she leaves for the date, and at the end of the day, she can't stomach how her ex wants to get it off with her, so she ditches him and rushes back home. Mayume gets pissed when she realizes that Kazuna had lied about the dish, but then she rushes to hug Ritsu when she sees her in tears. A few minutes later, Ritsu explains how she got moved because Mayumi reminded her of the protagonist in the book she was reading, but now she orders Mayumi to get her act together. This pisses Mayumi off, and she yells at Ritsu to give her back her tears. Meanwhile, Kazuna eavesdrops on the conversation, and he calls Ritsu a weirdo, but he's glad that he was worried over nothing, because she doesn't have someone she loves. Days later, after school, Kazuna spots Sayaka being yelled at by an older dude, so he calls out to her, and when she sees him, she scurries over and acts like he has fallen head over heels for him. When asked about his relationship with her, Kazuna simply tells the big guy that they are housemates, but then Sayaka complicates matters to the point where the dude tries to slime Kazuna. Suddenly, Ritsu throws a book at him and blames the wind for it. She tells the fella he's in the way, so he excuses her, and she walks into the manor. Kazuna tries following her, but he gets yanked and asked about his relationship with Ritsu. When he learns that she had saved him, Kazuna blushes, and he nearly gets clobbered. This time around, Shiro interrupts by asking what's wrong, and when Kazuna looks at him for help, he nearly freaks out after seeing a cop holding him. During dinner, Shiro explains how the cop had caught him trying to sneak in cultured content from a disposal site, so he walked him back home. Sayaka then apologizes to Kazuna for causing him trouble, and he readily acknowledges her apology. Mayume calls him a dunce for not realizing Sayaka's bad habit of provoking guys she doesn't like and leading them on. Sayaka tries using her googly eyes to get away with troubles, but Sumiko scolds her not to bring problems to the manor, and Ritsu backs her up by vowing to raise her rent. Not wanting to be kicked out, Sayaka apologizes sincerely, and Kazuna learns how scary women can be. Mayumi, on the other hand, warns Sayaka to stop leading men on, but Sayaka plays innocent and then tells her that men refuse to give up when she turns them down. She quietly disses Mayumi by asking her if she is well versed in the field, but then Shiro suffers the brunt when he advises her to take off her makeup. Later that night, Kazuna thanks Ritsu for saving him earlier, and he gasses her till she leaves embarrassed. Sayaka then gives him terrible advice, and Sumiko scolds her for it. Kazuna gets fired up from Sayaka's advice, so one time after school, he shows up next to Ritsu and chooses to walk home with her since they both finished late from school. At first, things get awkward, so Kazune rambles on, and Ritsu asks him if he has a flat tire, since he chooses to yap rather than ride. Rather than cower, he asks her for attention, and he's surprised she closed her book to listen to him, so he wonders if being a bit pushy will get him closer to his goal. Later that evening, while they have dinner, Sumiko offers them alcohol, and they are shocked as Mayume rejects it, so they ask her if hell has frozen over, or if she's seen another loser she wants to date. Mayume tells them she's just going to meet with her friend, but just then, she gets a phone call, and after answering it, she snatches a shot and instantly gulps the contents. Then she reveals how her friend, who had advised her to diet and lose some weight because she was planning to take her along to a mixer, has broken up with her boyfriend, so the mixer won't happen. Just watching her rant and return to her old ways makes Kazuna wonder if he should be disappointed or delighted in her suffering. Mayume continues sulking, and she turns to Ritsu for some echo chamber, but Ritsu cannot relate. Sayaka, who Mayume cannot stand, then speaks on how Ritsu refuses to make friends, but Ritsu explains that it's not her decision but her situation. Kazuna shushes Sayaka up, and Ritsu explains how she can't easily mingle with juniors because they don't come from her former school. Also, with them not bothering her makes things easier for her to read. After listening to her, Kazuna learns that it's her decision not to make friends. During that period, Sayaka latches on to Mayume, and as they wrestle, Sumiko sends them to their respective rooms. Inside, Kazuna tries to get advice from Shiro about how to handle Kazuna, but then Shiro goes off about his desires, which, if mentioned, can get the channel flagged. So Kazuna shuts him up and goes to bed. Unfortunately, he finds it hard to sleep as he wonders if Ritsu truly has things easier by being alone. So the next day he stalks her and sees how undisturbed she looks when reading. As usual, he shows up just when she's about to head home, and then walks with her, but then she catches on. So she asks him not to bother worrying about her because of what she had said the day before. After all, her hobbies don't quite match with the normies. Hearing her out alone makes him more concerned, so he wishes to get closer to her. To his surprise, Ritsu asks him if adapting to the housemates doesn't wear him out, and she's surprised he calls himself Mahoraga, so she calls him amazing, when in actuality, she has grouped him as one of the unstable folks. Due to Sayaka's advice, Kazuna pesters Ritsu all day long, and Mayume compares him to simps with zero riz game. One time, he doesn't see her heading home, so he goes to the bookstore to look for her, and he's surprised when her former school classmates meet up with her, and they happily converse. Watching them exchange contact, Kazuna learns that Ritsu actually loves interacting with people. After a while, they leave, and she gets the chills after spotting him, then she takes off like a jet. He goes after her and asks her if she's glad to meet her friends from junior school, but then she tells him to stop jumping to conclusions and bugging her. Realizing how harsh she sounded, Ritsu tries to play it off, but then she runs from her problem like it requires paying for child support. Kazuna hates himself for fumbling his chances, so he wishes he were reincarnated as a worm. When Mayume sees him, she explains how he amused her and how he shouldn't have taken Sayaka's word of advice seriously. The next day, Shiro finds Ritsu weeding, and he suspects something must have happened between her and Kazuna, so he asks her about it and reveals that Kazuna also has been depressed. Shiro confirms that she's depressed, so he joins her to have a proper conversation. Meanwhile, Kazuna spots them, so he listens in and learns how Ritsu went with the flow with her former classmates, despite always wanting to act alone, and she also wishes she wasn't tagged as lonely. Ritsu opens up to Shiro about how she feels bad for taking out her frustration on Kazuna, but then Shiro cheers her up by telling her not to chase being perfect, and it's okay for her to start over and believe she's fine the way she is. Kazuna starts feeling weird, and as he hopes love doesn't bud between the two, Ritsu proves him right. The next day after school, he sees Ritsu about to cross the road, so he walks over and silently stands next to her before attempting to cross, only for him to see her still glued to her book. He goes back to her side, and waits for a long time till he runs out of patience. Then he shoves her back to reality before telling her it's okay to read while they walk home. On their way, he tries to clear the air like a stalker who has just been caught, but then Ritsu smiles at him and calls him a weirdo. After noticing that she's not mad at him, Kazuna willfully accepts how things are. He suddenly spots a rainbow, so he calls her attention to it, then he apologizes for disturbing her, but she surprises him by thanking him. At first, he asks Ritsu to repeat what she said, but when she tries hiding it, he welcomes her for thanking him, and she blushes hard at his riz. As the days go by, Kazuna notes how he has progressed to walking Ritsu home under the pretext of keeping her safe, but he wants to go beyond that and graduate to hand-holding. Still, the simp accepts his little victory, and when they get home, they see Sayaka, who tries to get a squeeze in on Mayume's plots, and Kazuna notes it's frightening how they've gotten accustomed to them. As he keeps feasting his eyes, Mayume calls out to him for help, but the loser, who is on his way to Nirvana, remains glued on the spot. Ritsu then tries to separate them, but is shocked to discover Sayaka reeks of booze. Instantly, Kazuna blames Mayume by asking her why they hit the bottle too early, but Mayume swears on her ex's life that she hasn't had a drop, and when she came back from work, Sayaka instantly jumped her. Ever since, she's been wrestling to get herself free, but Sayaka is adamant to get that smooch in. Just then, Sumiko shows up with a bag and uses it on Sayaka to get Mayumi away from her. After that, Sayaka apologizes, and the ladies interview her, wondering what had happened to her for her to drink alone. There, she reveals how she had met her ex in a mixer, and because she didn't want things to feel awkward, she smiled through it all. But then the deluded guy took it the wrong way, and he thought she still had it for him, so he kissed her, and she ended up ruining his golden jewels. By her logic, to get rid of his lips, she dashed home and waited to ambush Mayume's. Currently, Sayaka gets irked as she expresses how much she hates exes, but then Mayume chimes in, saying she shouldn't be too harsh on them. After all, the men can't move on. Everybody who hears her, apart from Shiro, who wants to get himself tied up, internally concludes that she's a pot calling the kettle black. Kazuna asks to confirm that she hasn't moved on from her ex, and Mayume shamelessly admits it. She then waffles on about how men and women love differently, but then Sayaka explains why Mayume's poor analogy has only made her end up with walking scums. Instead, she advises Mayumi to check for the common traits in her deadbeat exes, and use them as a factor to screen them out so she can get someone decent. Ritsu agrees with her, but then, Sayaka attacks her next by saying she screens all her candidates using trifling things, and that she ends up being a loner. Ritsu tries to defend herself, but then Sayaka uses it to her advantage to remind Ritsu that she hasn't had a romantic partner. Curious, Shiro asks them how they'll describe his own relationship life using a computer system. She then tries to take Ritsu's first, but Kazuna steps in and shields Ritsu from being pecked. Ritsu storms off, embarrassed, and Kazuna goes after her. Sumiko, on the other hand, scolds Sayaka for acting like a virus. Then she finds Kazuna at the walkway, worrying that he has blown his chance as usual. There, she advises him by telling him that while Ritsu doesn't mind being alone, she doesn't always want to be alone. Later during dinner, Ritsu and Kazuna eat awkwardly, and it pisses Mayume off, so she yells at them to kiss and make up already. One time, during the summer heat, Mayume sprays Kazuna with water, and she expects him to feast his eyes on her drenched clothes.
Wow! Beautiful!
Kazuna simply answers like a halfwit, but then something which isn't the shield hero rises when he tries to imagine Ritsu in a drenched outfit. Unfortunately for him, Ritsu shows up in a raincoat, ruining his thought process. She gets serious after sensing that Kazuna had another agenda, so she clips him with her Glock. Sumiko then asks Sayaka to join, but as Sayaka refuses, Shiro concludes she doesn't want to join them because she'll ruin her makeup. She gets pissed at him and hits him with a bucket. Later that day, after having fun, Kazuna sees Ritsu's book, so he tries going through it, and he ends up laughing like a psycho. When she sees him, he apologizes, then tells her how he's always curious to know what she likes in the books, and just by reading the first page, he's super motivated to give it a try. He then hands her the book, but she tells him to continue. After all, she has finished reading it. As she walks back to her room, the others see her smiling and conclude she's really in a good mood. The next day, she checks on him to know his progress, and he tells her he's a slowpoke, which is why he's still on the 4th chapter. Suddenly, Mayume kicks him off, and they get into an argument. Ritsu listens to them, and they are surprised she hasn't left, so she takes her leave. Kazuna feels bad, and Mayume blames him before grinning like a devil. Later that night, the housemates gather, and Shiro asks Ritsu to tell them about her novels, but Ritsu says she sucks at narrations, and she doesn't want to help Shiro. Shiro then asks her to talk about writing, but Sumiko plays a UNO reverse card by saying he's well versed in the field. Shiro immediately becomes shy, and tells Kazuna sizes him up after learning he is talented. Sumiko then encourages everyone to come up with a thrilling story to help them fight their boredom. Sayaka takes the cue by speaking taking on a horrific real event, but Shiro and Kazuna tell her to stop. Up next, Mayume takes to the podium and narrates an isekai story, but then she ends up insulting men by indirectly calling them cowards. She then cooks up a fantasy story about how a geezer plays with a taser while having a soak in a river. Kazuna gets scared, so he asks Sayaka to continue. There, Sayaka introduces Shiro as a floating character, and Ritsu continues the story by narrating how the old couple had pity on him and dragged him with them. She then introduces Kazuna as a captive whom the couple fights for, but then Sumiko concludes the story like a Disney one. After hearing their views and ideas, Shiro feels motivated to write a story, and Sumiko tells him to let her read it as soon as he's done. Kazuna, on the other hand, feels very sleepy, and Shiro makes fun of him for struggling with a book late into the night. Kazuna disagrees, and as he talks about how easy the book is to read, he asks for Ritsu's opinion, so they get into the details like nerds and break down scenes and themes of the story. At first, they are on the same page, but just then their views diverge, and it keeps getting worse, so Kazuna believes he has blown off his chance to get closer to Ritsu, unknown to him that she is really glad to have him. Some days later, on the way to school, Kazuna apologizes to Ritsu about his parents forgetting to pay his monthly rent, but she tells him it's okay, as long as he's only a few days late. To make him feel better, Ritsu reveals how Mayume and Sayaka are frequently late on their payments, but then Shiro has never failed to pay on time. Hearing that Shiro can act responsibly irks them. As they wonder how Shiro makes money, they see him on a pickup truck selling bamboo. Later that evening, he explains to them that he got them for free after helping Sumiko's friend get some. Now he's at a loss for what he wants to use them for. As he brainstorms, coming up with ideas, and arguing with Kazuna on how he might get arrested, Sumiko shows up and informs him that he's got a call from the police. The housemates immediately conclude he'll get arrested, but Shiro reveals how he found a missing wallet and reported it to the police. Based on his description, they believe the cop earlier got confused because he must have thought Shiro wanted to turn himself in. After the call, Shiro informs them that Chinatsu, the wallet owner, has met with the police, and she'll be stopping by the following day to thank him for his help. The housemates, upon hearing him, hope Shiro gets a chance at love. The following morning, Chinatsu shows up with her mother to thank Shiro, and the housemates realize she's a youngling. The mom looks terrified of Shiro, and she thinks of how to leave the manor as quickly as possible. Shiro, on the other hand, loves the judgmental stare, and this makes the mother uncomfortable. Just then, Sumiko offers some pudding to the family, but as the mother politely refuses, Chinatsu readily chooses to stay and have some. Some seconds later, as she digs into her treats, she sees Shiro working on a toy, so she asks him if there are other young people around, but he tells her no. This makes her wonder why he's crafting such an item, but then he educates her that adults, too, are allowed to have fun. Since it'll take a while to couple the pieces together, Shiro tells her she's free to come around whenever she's free. While seeing her off, he says a lot of things that can get him arrested, but then he believes she's better off hanging around with her friends. To his surprise, she shows up, asking him about his progress with his craft, but Shiro disappoints her like a conman. She gets curious and wonders why he hasn't made any progress since there's nothing better for him to do, but he tells her he's writing a novel and does other stuff. She scornfully stares at him, and he's glad she has great potential to dominate. He takes her to the common room to showcase his progress so far, and she realizes he's a hopeless wreck, so she offers to show up every day and help him with the work. The residents watch as they build their project, and they hope Shiro doesn't do anything illegal that'll taint their image. Since they know he doesn't act first, they relax, believing Chinatsu is alright, but to their very surprise, she shows up one day and confesses to him. The residents heave a sigh of relief when Shiro tells her to get back to him in a couple of years. He then leaves to attend to Sumiko, and Mayumi decides to convince her to let go of Shiro and focus on Kazuna instead. She refuses, so Mayume pulls out her trump card by calling Shiro her dog and calling Chinatsu a pipsqueak who should crush on people in her age bracket. Mayume's harsh tone hurts Chinatsu, so she runs off in tears. Without wasting time, the residents blame Mayume and conclude she has the same mental age as Chinatsu. The next day, Chinatsu doesn't show up and Shiro wonders why, but then Sayaka snitches that one of them got into a fight with Chinatsu. Immediately, Mayume tries to save herself by blaming Kazuna, but Kazuna explodes and tells Sumiko and Shiro how Mayume had tried to gatekeep Shiro to herself. Mayume tries to defend herself, but nobody supports her, and this makes Shiro blame himself for choosing to follow the law. They get pissed at him and vow to tie him to a post if he doesn't perish that thought. They decide to wait to see if she'll show up the next day, but the day passes, and she doesn't turn up. When Kazuna and Ritsu come back from school, they talk about Chinatsu and wonder what she sees in Shiro. Ritsu slips up about how Kazuna is a better choice, but once she sees him blush, she corrects her notion by saying he's better than Shiro as a person, since he hasn't been apprehended by the cops. Just then, they spot Chinatsu not far away, and are surprised when her classmates avoid her like a plague. While heading home, they discuss what Mayume has said about how Chinatsu will get excluded from her friends if she keeps hanging around oldies. Later that evening, the adults roast Mayume non-stop after finding out about Chinatsu getting ostracized. Suddenly, Chinatsu's mother shows up looking for her daughter, and they all get worried, so Kazuna hops on his bike to look for her. Suddenly, he hears a sound from the bushes and goes to check there. To his surprise, he sees Chinatsu hiding behind the bushes, so he relaxes and informs the others. They call Chinatsu over and tell Mayume to talk her mind. Mayume struggles to cheer her up, and she even uses Ritsu as a case study. Once Chinatsu learns that Ritsu is a loner, Chinatsu asks her how she loves life that way. Ritsu then asks Chinatsu what's wrong with her, and Chinatsu explains how she snapped at her friend who kept on waffling about anime when her grades were horrible. This made her friend cry, and the entire class called Chinatsu a meanie. Ever since, they started avoiding her, and Chinatsu became a loner. Ritsu advises Chinatsu about how having one's hobby utterly rejected hurts, and Chinatsu cries as she realizes how complicated things have gotten. Sumiko and Mayume scold her, and they tell her not to think badly of herself since she's still very young. Sumiko then hands her some pudding, and as it lifts Chinatsu's spirit a little, she encourages Chinatsu to try and make amends with her friends. Shiro also tells her to invite her friends over next weekend, because by then, he will have wrapped up the project. The next weekend, she shows up with her friends, and they watch Shiro's marvelous invention. There, Chinatsu talks with Ritsu, and she learns Ritsu doesn't fully like being alone. Right after, they become friends and have a good time. After that day, Chinatsu doesn't visit the manor anymore, and Shiro feels lonely about it. He confirms Chinatsu simply wanted to use him to escape the feeling of being alone, then he tries coping, saying he doesn't feel sad. Later that night, Sumiko makes his favorite dish to cheer him up. One time, the residents get a warning notice about a flasher, and they see how excited Shiro is when he learns of this. They discuss how the molester cops feel out of people before bolting away. Sayaka brags about how she'll handle it with her nails, but then Mayume tells her it's the best time to use a manga line, which relates to Sayaka using pads as fillers. Sayaka gets mad and gives Mayume a hot chase, but then Shiro calls flashers and creeps scumbags. While he disses them, Shiro learns from Sumiko that people can break the weirdo's spirits, and he immediately gets excited, thinking about it. The others vow to execute him if he doesn't perish that thought, and he instantly complies. Curious, Kazuna asks him if they've encountered a creep, and Sayaka tells them of a time she buried her elbow in a loser's face who tried to rub his hands on her pants in a bookstore. Mayumi casually mentions how she encountered something much worse during her school days, and it creeps Ritsu out. Because of the recent incidents, Sumiko bans Ritsu from reading while walking, but she protests and even vouches for Kazuna as her guide. So for the next 3 days, Kazuna acts as her boyfriend by waiting for her after school and walking her home. He gets so pent up that Mayumi and Sayaka notice him and tease him for it. As Sayaka complains about Ritsu not having any other hobbies, Kazuna, who doesn't know Ritsu, is listening in on them and defends her like a simp. The next day, once they learn the creep has been caught, Ritsu takes off like a jet to the library, and Kazuna watches her go like a doting parent. As he waits joblessly outside for her return, 2 girls dash at Sumiko in tears and report how a flasher scarred their eyes with his sausage. Meanwhile, Ritsu heads home from the library, and the flasher shows her his goodies, but to his surprise, she walks past him like he's a ghost. Wanting to confirm if she's unaware, he grabs her, but just then, Kazuna smacks his hand off like a pesky fly, and then insults his sausage. Mayume also shows up and hasn't started one bit, so it has the flasher wondering if the group members are mentally stable. He tries to run away, but Sayaka kicks his golden jewels and then acts innocent about it. They then order Shiro to use his skill with the rope, and in less than a minute, he ties the flasher up in a questionable position. With that out of the way, they hand the creep to the police and head right home, where Kazuna scolds Ritsu for being oblivious to her surroundings. At first, she tries to defend herself, but he commends her for bragging that she can handle the unfiltered view of a glizzy. She gets embarrassed and apologizes to him before thanking him for helping her earlier. Right after, she beckons to him to come, and he walks gullibly into the girl's dormitory despite seeing her with a kendo stick. As a result, she proves she can handle herself in a real confrontation. Weeks later into the summer break, Kazuna complains about the heat and how he's very bored that he even considers getting a job. He goes to meet Ritsu and asks her to recommend some Rule 34 titles. As he walks back to his room, he realizes he's been in a stalemate with her and hasn't progressed their relationship. Even Sumiko feels lethargic, so she informs them that they'll dine outside that night and one of them will foot the bill. Mayume and Sayaka instantly steer clear of the bill, and they force Shiro to handle it. Before leaving for the venue, Sumiko tells them they'll head to Tei's restaurant, and Kazuna notes it'll be his first time eating out with Ritsu. On getting to the restaurant, the old crones catch up, and Tei says she needs an extra hand with handling her customers. Just then, she notices Kazuna perfectly sorting out their table, and with his help, they conclude on what to eat. Tei praises his skills and he thinks of working for her, but when she tells him he'll have to call the other workers by their nicknames, Sumiko reveals that Kazuna's alias is Oddhand. The name sounds hilarious, so as the girls make up stories about it, Kazuna opens up about how the name was coined from Oddball Handler, a name his classmates had given him during school days, since he was acting like an eccentric. He learns that Sumiko had found out about him when they had a nice, long chat when he first wanted to get a place to stay. He then wishes the ground could swallow him up when he sees Ritsu trying her best to hold her laugh. As they head home that night, the others try to cheer him up, so they reveal their funny nicknames which they earned in the past. And at first he gets pissed at them since theirs sound cooler, but when he hears Mayume's story, he thanks his stars he didn't end up like her. The next day, Tae shows up at the common room with Sumiko, and they order Kazune to get rid of his clothes. He does as instructed, thinking he'll get to roleplay, but they surprise him by dressing him in a uniform. Tae then instructs him that it's for his part-time job, but Kazuna complains that he looks weird. Suddenly, Ritsu shows up and shocks him by shyly admitting she likes the fit. She hands him the books he had asked her for the previous day, and he's glad she had him in mind. The oldies tie the book to him to make sure he looks like an apprentice, and Ritsu is at a loss for words. On the day Kazuna is to resume work, he puts on his apprentice wear from home. Seeing him, Shiro asks him if he won't roast himself from the summer heat, but Kazuna tells him it's not far, when in all honesty, he loves how passionate Ritsu stares at him when he puts on the uniform. On getting to work, Tae informs him he'll work in a guest house that's remodeled after the Meiji era. He sees some other workers in normal outfits, so he tells her he wants to work in their line of fields, but Yamamoto, a co-worker, speaks like a ladies' man. They introduce themselves shortly, and Yamamoto rants non-stop, creating a backstory for Kazuna. When they enter the guest house, Saganji stops Yama and then briefs Kazuna on how similar the guest house cafe is to a normal one. As they converse, Kazuna concludes that Saganji is a normal person until the four-eyed beta starts ranting about ancestral spirits. Before long, Sakanji and Yamamoto get into a standoff, and they end up disturbing their guests. When Kazuna gets home, he complains about how his life is difficult, but then Mayume, who is sober, objects and reveals how cruel her junior colleague was for planning a mixer and keeping her in the dark. Ritsu wonders what's so special about the mixers, and she shivers while calling it a bother to attend one. Mayume tries to prove how proper mixers are different from the ones the students attend, but then she realizes she has no plan for a mixer, even if one comes up. Suddenly, Kazuna gets a call from Tagami, who asks him if he wants to go to a mixer. Kazuna candidly replies that he's got the demon lord breathing on his neck, so he cuts the call, and Mayume punishes him for being lucky. She reads his text, and as she tries to cancel his plans, she sees a photo of a pretty girl named Hayashi, whom he'll meet at the mixer. When Mayume sees her, she disses the girl for being faker than Barbie. Kazuna tries to recall the student with such a name, and he is shocked when he realizes she's the same Hayashi who was a part of his former school squad. The others assume she'll make a move on him at the mixer, and they believe it's thanks to him that she has changed her behavior. But to their surprise, Kazuna gets another text, and they learn that Hayashi doesn't plan to go to the mixer if he shows up. After reading it out, Mayume admits that Kazuna is living life in hard mode. On the evening of their mixers, Kazuna performs his cafe duties while noting that he'll never find true love with the way life is so unfair to him. As he thinks about his chances with Ritsu, a new group of people enters the cafe, and to his surprise, he sees Hayashi, who is also shocked to see him. Back at home, Sayaka and Mayume, who are bored out of their mind, try ordering Shiro about to get materials to use as comebacks. But Sumiko shows up and suggests they drop by Kazuna's workplace. She drags Ritsu along and makes her put on traditional attire. At the guest house, Kazuna tries to converse with Hayashi, but she waves him off and acts like they are strangers. He feels bad, but then watches as his fellow co-workers complain about the students' bad behavior when they try to ask for orders. One of them spots Kazuna, so he asks Kazuna to take their orders. When Kazuna enters the room, the entire group makes fun of him, and he watches as Hayashi reveals his cringy past and hides her involvement in it. Coincidentally, Kawaii Complex residents arrive at the guest house, and they overhear the group verbally abusing Kazune, so they take matters into their own hands. First and foremost, Ritsu walks in looking stunning in her attire, and she requests Kazuna's service downstairs. Despite being shocked, the students try to ridicule Kazuna, but then Ritsu stands up for him and walks out of the room. As if that isn't enough, the older ladies yank Kazuna out of the room, and as they caress him with their plot armors, the male students wish they could swap places with Kazuna. Sayaka then avenges Kazuna by revealing that Hayashi uses fake eyelashes. When Mayume takes Kazuna downstairs, she warns him to stop being nice all the time and should have given Hayashi a piece of his mind. Instead, he tells her that despite everything Hayashi did, he can't bring himself to hate her. Mayume brushes his self-esteem and reminds him that Ritsu is waiting for them, so he eagerly goes to their table, only to find out that she has ditched him. Mayume briefs Shiro, and he realizes why Ritsu came back looking pissed before getting embarrassed, and then decides to head home. Kazuna returns to his post shortly, and as his co-workers try to console him, he reveals he's happy thanks to Ritsu, who stood up for him. Later that night, Sumiko prepares his favorite dish and pairs him with Ritsu, who asks him if he has read the books he recommended earlier. Kazuna apologizes, but then Ritsu tells him which book to start with, and she calls it the funniest book. Hearing this makes him realize that she's trying to cheer him up, and he's glad she's very considerate. As the dining atmosphere gets sappy, Mayume ruins it by declaring that Kazuna was staring at her milkers, which might have been because she had buried his face in them earlier. On hearing this, Ritsu moves away from Kazuna, hence resetting all his efforts to get close to her once again. One evening, Kazuna receives a call from Tagami, who wants him to introduce them to Mayume. Meanwhile, Mayume vents out her frustration on Shiro, and she whacks him while telling him to set Kazuna up in such a way that Ritsu will never forgive him. After venting for a while, the others ask Mayume what's wrong, and she reveals that her workmate got herself a boyfriend, which means she gets to be the cranky person. What's worse is Sayaka reveals it's their boss, so Mayume takes out her frustration on Shiro. Curious, Kazuna asks Mayume while she's sitting on Shiro's shoulders, and she reveals it makes her feel great because she gets to look down on them like they are worms, and she believes Shiro's mental toughness will rub off on her. Mayume complains about how her boss had printed a photo of her and her boyfriend before going into a long ramble about how they got together. Brimming with jealousy, she notes that people who print photos with their partners don't end up getting married to them. Without wasting time, Sayaka brings out Mayume's guitar, which has a shared photo of her with her ex. Looking at it makes her very depressed, so she climbs onto the rooftop where she believes she'll get to look down on more people. Then she picks up the guitar and announces she has some songs to play for them. Sumiko readies some treats for the event, and Sayaka joins her, and they listen to Mayume's self-derogatory song. Kazuna sits with Ritsu and learns that before he joined the residence, Ritsu used to run the manor with her mom, but after her old lady went overseas, she started reading even more since she didn't want to grow up and end up like them. Kazuna relates to her and notes that the residents are not just chaotic, but also annoying, and she agrees with him. Mayume sings deep into the night, and they yell at her to shut it. For once, she starts acting reasonably as she reflects on her past relationships, but then she blames all her situation on her first boyfriend. Sumiko pleads with her to leave the rooftop, but Mayume yells at them, believing they see her as a shallow woman. As expected, Sayaka agrees and calls her easy, but then says she loves her. This pisses Mayume off, and Shiro doesn't make things easier when he also tells her he loves her. Sumiko joins them by saying Mayume is amusing and calling her a resident they can't all do without. Touched, Mayume looks down and sees her housemates eagerly waiting for her to come down so they can have dinner, so she gets down. Later that night, a scream rings out of the manor, and Ritsu crashes into Kazuna. He is shocked because things didn't go according to script, so he takes out his frustration on Mayume, who later clobbers him for it. Some minutes later, Kazuna asks Ritsu for details, and she freaks out while trying to explain how a centipede fell on her book earlier. Spooked, she ran to Sumiko's room only to freak out after seeing Sumiko's Japanese dolls. Ritsu then went to Mayume's room to tell her about her finding, but Mayume concluded badly due to her blurry vision, and they ended up running for their lives. Presently, Shiro explains how centipedes show up during rainy seasons, but Sumiko often takes care of them. Once they learn that centipedes survive being squashed or taped, Ritsu pleads with Kazuna to help her find the centipede, and he gets all fired up better than super science. Altogether, they prepare a remedy to get rid of the centipede and walk into the female dormitory. On getting there, Mayume asks them to check out her room, and when they switch on the lights, they lose the willpower to start their search, so they leave. She tries convincing them to search her room, but they tell her it's a pigsty. Kazuna gets excited as he'll get to enter Ritsu's room for the first time, and when he walks in, he sees it's a mini library. He excitedly checks her bed, and when he hears her permit him to get rough with her sheets, his lightsaber looks for soldiers to fight. Realizing the centipede isn't in Ritsu's book anymore, Mayume grabs Shiro and hurries off to her room to check the place. Kazuna and Ritsu check around and then go back outside. On their way, Kazuna sees the centipede on her clothes, so he tries to snuggle it off without her suspecting, but he fails woefully at it. Once she feels the centipede, she loses her balance, screams frantically, and nearly keels over, but Kazuna grabs her and calms her down. They get closer than ever, but Kazuna, who isn't used to happiness, internally fangirls. Meanwhile, Mayume sees the centipede and nearly overreacts, but Sayaka shows up and quickly wraps it up in a bag. They gather once more in the common room. Minutes later, they all agree to sleep, but just then, Ritsu sees Kazuna's arm and realizes it was when he acted as a meat shield to protect her. She stops him from leaving, then runs to get him an ice pack, before apologizing and thanking him for saving her. The simp thanks his stars, and he wishes they could remain that way for a long time. The next day, Shiro and Kazuna go over to Mayumi to ask her if she's still in a bad mood regarding the centipede situation they faced the previous day, but she remains silent. Just then, Kazuna sees Tagami, who happily asks him to introduce him to Mayumi, but then Kazuna yells at him for showing up. Confused, he asks Tagami how he found the place, and Tagami says he simply asked a police station for directions, and they warned him to steer clear of the manor. Once he sees Mayumi, he stares at her melons and asks how Kazuna can walk properly with a hottie like her nearby. Tagami then introduces himself to her and asks if she'd love to hang out with her. Watching him try to rizz her up amuses Mayumi, so she poses like a fashion queen and tries sweet-talking Tagami. Kazuna quickly drags his friend out of the compound. Then he goes back to inform Mayumi Tagami's age. When she learns she's twice his age, she immediately backs off. Some minutes before shift duty, Kazuna drips a bucket of water from the heat while reading a novel, and Shiro and Mayumi tease him by comparing him to an agile sausage. He acts like a gigachad, but Mayumi reveals how he plans to show off his fit as an aura farmer to Ritsu just before going to work. Speaking of work, he tells them that he'll quit soon, and they wonder why, since his salary isn't half bad, but then he notes that he'd love to reduce the number of weirdos he'll interact with. Mayumi asks him if he's still upset about Hayashi, but before he can give a reply, Shiro nearly frames him for his kind of crime. Mayumi then informs him that Ritsu had left earlier for the library, and this pisses Kazuna off because he simply wasted his time trying to act cool. On getting to work, Kazuna sees his colleagues sorting out new books, and when they tell him about it, not only do their stories not match, but the workers express their differences in keeping the books and creating spaces for others. Left with no choice, Kazuna follows his discretion, and he sorts out the old books on the shelves. Impressed by the sheer quantity, Kazuna considers inviting Ritsu over to take a look at them. When Kazuna completes his task, they realize there are free spaces, and Tae worries about it, so she wonders if there's a way to fill the space with books that match. Tae then calls Sumiko to ask if she can lend some old books to fit their shelves. In return, Ritsu not only gets to enjoy a free coffee but also gets to read the books there. Ritsu readily agrees, and Shiro also joins in to help move the books after learning he'll get free cake for his effort. Tae thanks Kazuna for his suggestion, and she tells him Shiro will bring the books in his car. Surprised at this, Kazuna stands in the sun as he readily anticipates seeing Shiro's vehicle, only to be disappointed to see the wretched man pulling a cart. When they get inside, Ritsu glues herself to the showcase and drools from happiness in seeing more books she can burrow into. Some minutes later, Kazuna brews her tea, and he sees how engrossed she is in the fresh set of books she just got her hands on. He blushes like a princess, but when he spots Shiro pushing himself to the limit outside for the thrill of knowing how far he can withstand the heat, Kazuna yells at him to get inside. The weirdo continues testing himself till he eventually gasses out. Not too far off, he sees Hayashi staring through the window, so he calls out to her, and she goes to his side to have a conversation with him. There, Shiro learns that Hayashi wants to apologize for her mean behavior back then, but she doesn't know how to. As a word of advice, Shiro starts by telling her how he was on the verge of having a heat stroke, and Kazuna still offered him a cold glass, despite being disgusted by Kazuna. Shiro asks Hayashi to get into details on how Kazuna treated her, so she goes down the memory lane, back to when she was a total dork. Back then, she made chocolates for him on Valentine's Day, but then overheard the girls in her class making fun of her and calling her a bad match with Kazuna. After school, she seemed down, but he reached out to her by asking her what the matter was, so she informed him of her story. Seeing how kind he was to listen to it makes her feel bad when her friends made fun of him. Presently, Kazuna opens the window to tell Shiro to get inside, but he's surprised to see Hayashi, so he asks her what she's doing there. Hayashi summons the courage and at first tries to apologize, but then she thanks him for taking all the insults for her and always supporting her. Right after, she apologizes for taking advantage of him, and since he senses her sincerity, he forgives her before telling her to fix her makeup. When the girls hear him, they scold him for being a softie, but they aren't surprised when Ritsu, whom they expect to support them, is glued to her book. After that, Kazuna urges Hayashi to come in, and she asks him how he can be so forgiving. Like a gigachad, Kazuna tells her he's running out of apple cloud storage to store beef between them, which is why he has let bygones be bygones. He then tells her to thank his friends, so in the restroom, Mayumi sees Hayashi as her kindred, who got rejected, but Hayashi tells him she only aims for people she's sure want her back. Mayumi makes it painfully obvious how she's leagues ahead of Hayashi and Sayaka, and as Sayaka wrestles with her, Seihanji shows up with a doll which he calls Hayashi's ancient spirit. To their surprise, she falls for him, and they realize they wasted their time trying to cheer her up. During the summer break, Kazuna meets with Ritsu to help him with his homework, which involves reviewing one of her books. Mayume teases him about it being his first time, and he struggles to prevent the phrase from getting to his head. Ritsu smiles when she learns that people who read in the guest house love her books, but then her face gets serious as soon as he mentions Hayashi as a frequent visitor who reads a lot. Mayume wonders if Kazuna is trying to reboot a meeting with his supernatural team, but he tells her it won't happen after all. He'll soon quit the job. With that, he takes off to do his shift. After he leaves, Mayume believes Kazuna has gotten nicer, and she concludes he won't quit his part-time job. Chinatsu shows up shortly afterwards and asks Shiro to help her with her summer project. The jobless entity gets on with it, and he makes rounded mud, and the girls join in to assist him. While at it, Chinatsu asks Ritsu if she's dating Kazuna, and Mayume is pissed that she got skipped. Chinatsu drops the bomb, revealing how much Kazuna likes Shiro, but then Ritsu doesn't believe her, and she calls him a good person who simply cares for others. When Chinatsu learns that Kazuna is hanging out with Hayashi, she teases Ritsu about it later that evening when Kazuna returns from work. Ritsu glares at him before storming off. Confused, he asks them what's going on, and Mayume reveals how he missed a once-in-a-lifetime chance to clutch Ritsu. While watching a television broadcast about pets, Sumeko asks everyone whether they prefer dogs or cats. Kazuna picks dogs, while Shiro chooses cats, going into a detailed explanation like he's defending a thesis. Kazuna ignores the nerdy breakdown and asks if they can keep one in the house. Sumeko says it's fine, but Mayume shuts the idea down, explaining how pets distract single people from their loneliness. Sayaka advises her to get one to ease her pent-up frustration before calmly finding a man. Moments later, Mayume considers getting a dog, but it seems to be a drag. Sumeko suggests getting a rabbit since they are cute. Mayume welcomes the idea, but Sayaka teases her, and they bicker back and forth. Kazuna asks Ritsu, who reveals she likes both dogs and cats. Kazuna notices the awkward vibe since the other day and wonders why. Sumeko reminds Ritsu about her love for big dogs, and Kazuna talks about Labradors. Ritsu narrates how an old neighbor had one, but Sayaka interrupts, teasing her about Kazuna's similarity to a big dog. Flustered, Ritsu denies it and storms off fuming. Sayaka and Mayume tease Kazuna about Ritsu being more sensitive around him. Right then, Tsunade arrives and asks for Sayaka. Without hesitation, Sayaka flash steps to the entrance to intercept her. Tsunade brings up her high school reunion, but Sayaka tries to brush her off. Unfortunately for her, Tsunade had already contacted Sumiko, who warmly welcomed her to stay. Tsunade notices a spiked bat in the hallway, which immediately brings back memories. She narrates how Sayaka wrecked a farm shed in junior school, but Sayaka quickly interrupts her. Shiro suggests moving Tsunade's luggage to Sayaka's room, but Sayaka refuses, claiming it's messy. Tsunade blabs about Sayaka's stash of BL comics, putting her in a tighter spot. At this point, Kazuna and Mayume realize that Tsunade knows Sayaka's weaknesses. While drinking together, Tsunade shares stories from Sayaka's past, enough to keep everyone entertained. She narrates how Sayaka was punished for nabbing and selling eggs from her relative's poultry. Moments later, Tsunade says she's glad Sayaka became her friend, but Sayaka considers it a mistake. Tsunade admits she was sad they didn't attend the same high school. Presumably, Sayaka went to an all-girls school and was always busy with relationships or boys' love content during holidays, which made them drift apart. Not long after, Tsunade gets drunk and falls asleep. The following morning, Sayaka wakes Tsunade and decides to help out with her makeup, since there'll be people she can't stand at the reunion. By the time Tsunade is ready to leave, her transformation is so impressive that Kazuna, Ritsu, and Mayume can't help but wonder what type of sorcery Sayaka performed. Before Tsunade leaves, Sayaka mentions she won't be going back home anytime soon, since she already visited recently. The next morning, Sumeko wakes Sayaka, explaining that a friend's pet wandered into her room. The moment Sayaka sees the silhouette of a rabbit, she panics instantly, screams, and bolts out of her room, running straight into Kazuna in the hallway. With that, Sumeko confirms that Sayaka hates rabbits. Conversely, Sayaka threatens to beat the crap out of Kazuna if Mayume ever finds out. At school, Kazuna finds Ritsu in the library, completely absorbed in a book as usual. After calling her a few times, he finally gets her attention, and they decide to walk home together. On the way, Ritsu insists on reading while walking, and Kazuna reluctantly allows it. He reflects on his first meeting with her and their current complicated relationship. As he directs her, he ends up touching her shoulder and back, blushing bright red while thinking about her slender figure. When they get home, Mayume immediately notices their flustered expressions. Visibly concerned, Kazuna phrases how he touched her the wrong way and gets pummeled by Mayume. Ritsu explains how captivating the book was, and they realize it was the reason she was flustered. Sumeko asks about the book, and she happily narrates its content. Kazuna recalls how much she loves giving recommendations and an incident at the library. While Ritsu was deeply engrossed in a book, a girl named Maimura tried to start a conversation with her, but Ritsu didn't respond. Seeing how that might come off, Kazuna created a distraction to help smooth things over. Thanks to that, the two eventually started talking and bonded over their shared interest in books. Later on, Maimura and Ritsu exchange recommendations and discuss them after reading. Stalking them, Kazuna feels relieved that things turned out well, but once the two decide to walk home together, he realizes he has lost his alone time with Ritsu. On their way home, Maimura asks Ritsu several questions, and she tries to keep up with the conversation. At one point, she even thinks about how Kazuna doesn't ask that many questions. After learning about the Kawaii complex, Maimura asks about the boys living there, clearly expecting something intriguing. But Ritsu immediately shuts down any idea of romance, which unintentionally hits Kazuna, who happens to be nearby, harder than expected. To their shock, Maimura decides to drop by their house. Kazuna sprints past them at full speed while Ritsu tries to change her mind. Back at the manor, Mayume enjoys some alcohol while Sayaka presses Shiro, who's reading a boys' love comic. Shortly after, Ritsu arrives with Maimura, only to see a demure version of Sayaka and Mayume welcome them. Thereafter, Maimura asks about the dudes, but Kazuna has already captured Shiro. While the girls exchange contact, Kazuna sulks because Maimura beat him to it and concludes that he is nothing to Ritsu. Later that day, Ritsu receives a text that astonishes the others. They watch her type slowly, but she immediately gets a response. Mayume uses the opportunity to tease Kazuna, making fun of the cherry boy. The following day, Maimura interrupts every opportunity Ritsu gets to read at school and sends incessant messages at home. Days later, Mayumi and Kazuna walk into Ritsu, typing quickly but with a disinterested face. Kazuna tells Mayume to stay quiet and observes how Ritsu hasn't progressed in the book she's currently reading. At school, Maimura asks about Ritsu's weekend plans and coerces her into hanging out with other book lovers. On Saturday, Ritsu meets up with Maimura and her friends, but they decide to use another location. Ignorant of their plans, Ritsu tags along. Meanwhile, Sayaka waits somewhere, but somehow notices Ritsu and her friends meeting with some dudes. Sayaka returns to the boarding house and snitches, informing Kazuna about what she saw. Visibly disturbed, Kazuna recalls how the girls decided to use the library for their hangout, but Ritsu somehow finds herself in a mixer. In Kazuna's impulsive thoughts, a strange dude at the mixer forces Ritsu to have fun with him. Kazuna claims Ritsu might be in trouble, but the others point out his perverse fantasies instead. Meanwhile, in a karaoke booth, Ritsu quietly asks Maimura if it's really a gathering of book lovers. Maimura reassures her, gesturing toward the others as bookworms. Not long after, a guy named Mitsui joins their conversation. Maimura introduces him and mentions that he enjoyed the book Ritsu recommended, which catches her off guard. As Mitsui discusses the book, Ritsu listens before adding her thoughts. Another guy invites Mitsui to sing, but he prefers to discuss books with Ritsu. He asks about the other books she likes, and from her response, he concludes that Ritsu has superior taste. Mitsui starts making fun of a girl he once met who reads magazines but still calls herself a reader. The others laugh, and he continues, talking about people who pretend to like books just for appearances, which immediately ticks Ritsu off. Recalling how Kazuna had genuinely tried reading books she recommended, even when they were clearly not at his level. Without hesitation, she fires back at Mitsui, defending people like that, and it catches everyone off guard. Mitsui apologizes, but the atmosphere becomes noticeably awkward. Trying to recover, Mitsui pets Ritsu's hair and attempts to pull her closer, but she doesn't vibe with his riz. Fortunately, her phone rings at that exact moment, giving her the perfect excuse to step out. She notices Mayume's missed call and immediately receives a text. However, it happens to be Kazuna checking up on her. He mentions what Sayaka told him and offers to help if she needs it, but she turns him down. After chatting for a while, she decides to leave, informing Maimura about her decision. After getting off the bus later that evening, she's surprised to see Kazuna waiting for her. He explains that Sumeko asked him to come pick her up since it's already late. As they walk back together, Ritsu admits that it was exhausting and wonders how Mayume manages to attend mixers so often. Kazuna, relieved that Ritsu didn't click with any dude, notices she took books along. He concludes that she genuinely had no idea about the mixer. Just then, Ritsu loses it and vents about Maimura's constant messages and everything else that's been piling up. Kazuna asks if she plans to confront Maimura the same way she once confronted him. The memory makes Ritsu flustered, but she insists that he deserved it. Kazuna accepts and advises her to choose her words more carefully this time. The next day at school, Ritsu confronts Manor, who apologizes for not informing her about the mixer beforehand. She lists out her plausible reasons and tries to convince Ritsu to keep hanging out with her. She claims Mitsui already likes her and reveals her intention to help Ritsu get a boyfriend. Clearly upset, Ritsu asks why she did so without her permission, but immediately apologizes for crashing out. Maimura admits that she was trying to overcompensate with Ritsu because she had such issues with another friend. With that, Ritsu advises her to apologize to her friend. That night, back at the boarding house, Mayume points out how Ritsu isn't receiving texts again, and Kazuna wonders if she got through to Maimura. The following day, Kazuna meets Ritsu at the library after school and convinces her to head back with him. However, on their way out, they run into Maimura and her group, who seem to be getting along just fine again. The other girls ask Maimura if it's okay to leave Ritsu behind, and she simply explains that they didn't really click. On their way back, Ritsu reflects on the good memories of discussing books with Maimura. She bursts into tears and blames it on a scene in the book she's reading, forcing Kazuna to accept it. Back at the boarding house, the duo meets Mayume at the doorstep, drowning in alcohol and complaining about their lateness, while jealously talking about Ritsu's first mixer. Her over-the-top behavior helps lighten the mood, and Kazuna appreciates having someone as petty as her. Days later, Kazuna struggles to understand a book, and Shiro throws him adult-rated hints until he loses his mind. Thinking deeply, Kazuna plans to understand a book that Ritsu likes, hoping to get closer to her. Later, everyone gathers to enjoy a rare alcohol gifted by a neighbor, while the high schoolers have plum juice. Mayume reminisces about her past partners, but suddenly loses the plot. The others tease her, but Sayaka's comment causes her to crash out. To everyone's surprise, Ritsu gets drunk, and they realize she drank the wrong juice. Kazuna's fantasies blow out of proportion, hoping for a lucky break, but the other girls rain on his parade. Ritsu begins to run her mouth, calling Sayaka the B-word on several occasions and asking how she has a friend. Her words stun Kazuna, but Sumiko quickly gives her a glass of water to drink. Mayumi gives Ritsu advice on how friendships work and then blames her for losing her last friend. Kazuna tries to take the blame for advising Ritsu back then. Everyone starts sharing their views on friendships, agreeing that it's a mix of compatibility and tolerance. When Sumiko asks about Mitsui, Ritsu recalls his comments about new readers and firmly states that she can't stand him. The others wonder if she caused a scene at the mixer, but Kazuna is grateful that Mitsui isn't short-fused. Ritsu lashes out at Kazuna for being too nice, but he doesn't understand the context. She points out how he was still nice to Hayashi despite what she did to him. He then asks about Ritsu's stance on the issue, but she suddenly changes the topic, claiming she's hungry. Seeing her sulking for some dessert, Kazuna decides to get some from his room, but she wants to tag along. However, the other ladies decide to follow them, ruining his hopes of getting lucky. They decide to ransack his room for lewd contents, completely ignoring the original reason for coming. The next morning, Ritsu jolts awake in Kazuna's room and remembers everything with a slight hangover. She notices Kazuna's book and wonders why he's reading a difficult book. While Kazuna is outside, hoping they don't check his secret stash, Ritsu opens the book and sees his notes. Mayume wakes up next to her and tries to take a look, but Ritsu stops her. Just then, Kazuna announces he's coming in. The moment the door opens, Ritsu slips past him at surprising speed, leaving Mayume behind, still holding the book. Without hesitation, Kazuna grabs it from her, wondering if Ritsu saw it too. He notices her entries and immediately chases after her. He meets her in the hallway, and Ritsu teases him about his written comments. Thereafter, he agrees to show her his comments when he reads further and hopes she won't make fun of him then. He then requests that she add her comments too, just like she just did, and she agrees. Flustered, Ritsu turns to leave, but Kazuna asks for her contact. After exchanging contacts, Ritsu storms off when Mayume accuses them of flirting. Ritsu reads a book in her room, smiling as she glances at Kazuna's saved contact on her phone. That's the end of today's video. If you stayed until now, write pink plot in the comments. Give me plenty of likes, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see another recap like this. Peace.